Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Mario, and I am from Mexico. I'm going to be speaking about the indigenous past and present of psilocybin mushrooms in the Americas, particularly and specifically with the Mazatec people, which I consider to be the ancestors of the psychedelic movement. So Mexico is the richest country in psychoactive plants, seeds, and mushrooms. It is host to a great diversity of indigenous cultures that make use of these sacred plants. It is from this rich soil from which the psilocybin-containing mushrooms came to be known to the world. In pre-Hispanic Mexico, psychoactive plants and mushrooms were used for divination and healing purposes, and they were considered sacred. The Spanish conqueror brought the Inquisition, and the indigenous traditions with sacred plants and mushrooms were persecuted and almost extinguished. These sacred traditions had to hide in remote places, such as the Sierra Mazateca in Oaxaca, where it remained unknown to the Western civilization until the arrival of Gordon Wasson and his encounter with the Mazatec mushroom sage, Maria Sabina. From then on, the Western science has been transformed, and it's currently finding a lot of benefits, a lot of therapeutic potential from this Mazatec's sacred psychotechnology. In the past 2 decades, the Western science has renewed its interest in the potential benefits of psychoactive substances for mental health issues. The so-called renaissance of psychedelic science is gaining momentum and acceptance in different countries and institutions. Although Mexico is still behind regarding research in psychedelics. Modern Western psychiatry has found in psilocybin a breakthrough psychotherapy that has allowed us to treat mental health ailments that were resistant to conventional medicine and psychiatry. In this moment, where the psychedelic research is blooming in the global north, it is of utmost importance to look back at the roots that made this possible and to acknowledge and to honor the ancestors of the psychedelic movement that preceded us. In an article from Chacruna Institute, Marcelo Leite tells us, and I quote, "Psychedelics are currently undergoing a renaissance in psychiatry, with psilocybin at the forefront. However, this important substance is tainted by original sin. Science has never paid off its historical debt to the Mazatec people of Mexico, who preserved this psychoactive substance for posterity." So, one of the essential challenges for Mexico's research in psychedelic mushrooms, it is the recognition of the damage that we as Westerners have produced in the indigenous communities that have been guarding the sacred mushrooms. So we need to acknowledge the reality of colonization and cultural appropriation and bioprospecting, among other topics, and look for a healing and restoration of these very ancient wounds. So what is going on right now at Mexico? What is the situation with the psychedelic research? Well, as I told you, despite being the richest country in psychoactive containing plants and mushrooms, there has been so much stigma surrounding the research with these plants and mushrooms that were once considered sacred. Although I am very honored to participate in a recently approved research in Mexico. This is Mexico's first government-approved and financed psychedelic research. And alongside some of the best researchers in Mexico, I am doing a research that has this title, "A Dialogue of Knowledge Between the Therapeutic Potential of Psilocybin-Containing Mushrooms a transdisciplinary study through neuroscience, psychology, anthropology, history, biology, and of utmost importance, traditional indigenous knowledge. We strive to expand the way we do science in Western culture. We strive for a more comprehensive understanding of psychoactive mushrooms through a dialogue of knowledge between the different domains of modern science, as well as indigenous traditional wisdom and cosmology, by putting together natural sciences, health, mental health sciences, social sciences, ethics, reciprocity, and regulation. And at the heart of it all, it is the indigenous traditional medicine and cosmology. Some of the main objectives is analyze and understand the therapeutic potentials of fungi containing mushrooms from a transdisciplinary and intercultural perspective, to contribute to a recognition of traditional indigenous medicine, its knowledge, its ritual specialists, and its healing methods. Enrich current research around psychedelics by integrating ancient indigenous healing arts and cosmology, and contribute to the development of intercultural models of therapeutic intervention for a more effective and holistic treatment of mental disorders. We also would like to introduce the paradigm of complexity, transdisciplinarity, and dialogue of knowledge, interculturality, and social justice through the research project. So having that in mind, as we approach the Mazatec people doing fieldwork, getting to know their communities, their people, what are their challenges, what are their needs, well, there's several hard issues that we need to take into account. Well, so what's going on in Huautla de Jimenez, Maria Sabina's hometown? Well, after Watson's publication in the Life magazine in 1957, Huautla de Jimenez became the center of attention for a lot of people who traveled there in search for either spiritual enlightenment, shamanic guidance, and psychedelic journeys for safe exploration and healing. That in turn led to a social phenomenon known as psychedelic tourism, which still continues to this day and has had a very profound impact on the indigenous community and culture of the Mazatecs. Huautla is such an exemplary place where we can observe the dynamics of power and relation between Western white men and indigenous other. At best, this exotization at best, there is a perception of the indigenous other as a very exotic person, and it is projected into them the image of the noble savage, the pure souls of the or the ancestral shamans. At worst, they are looked upon as poor, ignorant, superstitious, and underdeveloped. This exotic image, this exotized image that the Western people have about the indigenous people has in turn been taken and appropriated by the indigenous people to be used in order for them to dress as exotically as they can, to sell the sacred traditional ceremonies, the so-called veladas. And they also use this as some sort of marketing. This, of course, leads to to another topic that's called or known as the commodification of the sacred. Since many indigenous people live in economic misery and extreme poverty, their only way out is by selling their own traditions. And of course, a Western person that comes with a lot of money can easily buy a ceremony or even a sort of preparation to become a shaman. This, of course, has caused many disputes within the town and very deep wounds within the sacred traditions of the Mazatecs. There is also the topics of bioprospecting and cultural appropriation, where a lot of different institutions have come to take and learn from this sacred technology and to gain benefits for their own institution, their own countries, their own people. But the Mazatec people remain in a very miserable state in regarding economic and political situation. So I wonder, can the Western psychedelic science keep advancing and progressing and thriving without taking care for its own ancestors? How can we work together with these people to seek justice, heal all wounds, and restore balance between cultures? And how do we avoid the repetition of an oppressive and colonizing behavior and cultural extractivism? Now, I don't have all the answers. It's part of the project to look for them, with them. In another article that's called Ethical Concerns about Psilocybin Containing Intellectual Property, several authors, such as Inti Garcia, which is a Mazatec guy who's also an academic, a scholar, he says, from an indigenous perspective, psilocybin research and drug development in the world tells of a story of extraction, cultural appropriation, bioprospecting, and colonization. And then in that same article, Ismail Ali from MAPS says, for now, companies commercializing traditional medicine should divert some funds to provide support for indigenous people. But that is only just one step. So one of the first steps, of course, is recognizing the depth that the psychedelic science owes to the people of the Mazatecs as one of the ancestors of this global psychedelic movement. Another way to addressing this problem, and this is what I've been focusing on, is by learning from their understanding of the human being and its relationship to the universe, and contrasting it with the way we as Westerners tend to do things. In this research project, we have expanded the map of the variables that influence an entheogenic experience. And so, besides the classic substance set and setting, we have added the variable of participants, integration, and worldview, and trying to contrast how those Westerners or Western science and therapies work with the patient or the consultant, and how the Mazatec people do it different. So one of the major differences is, for example, in the substance variable, is that they treat the mushrooms as if they were a living entity, a conscious being, a spirit that you can relate to. So it is not just a pill that you take to alleviate yourself from some symptoms. It is someone which you can relate to with respect and reverence. And they speak to the mushroom, they chant to the mushroom, they ask the mushroom for for guidance. Also, one of the other very important ways in which the Mazatec people do the ceremonies is by, like, the consultant, when it goes to a shotashine, which means kind of the healer, the one who knows, they also go with their family or with some very intimate friends. Even if just the consultant is taking the mushrooms, their family or their friends are there. That means that they put so much attention into the need for community, for deep healing. And of course, the worldview and cosmology also tells us so much about how they understand what is illness, what is healing, and what is the role that humankind has in the cosmos. So I've been studying and doing field work with different healers and sages and priests from the Sierra Mazateca. And I focused on the altar that they use. Normally in every velada, in every traditional ceremony, they do this in front of an altar. And I've studied the symbolisms of the altar since I consider it to be some sort of symbolic map of the spiritual geography. Now, in these altars, there is always images of saints, of several divinities, and it is structured in a way which I will be explaining in a moment. But anyway, these are symbols, images that serve as signs and reminders that orient and guide the traveler to navigate safely the different regions of the spiritual geography. It can be called the spirit world in this traditional perspective, or if we try to get a Western concept that might help us understand it, we might also call it the collective unconscious. Now, one essential teaching of the Mazatec people, and I would dare to say from most of the indigenous cultures in the world, is that there is a big importance into recognizing the spiritual dimension and the sacredness of nature and the interconnectivity of every being. Now, the altar is usually structured in a way that has one part facing to the north, one part facing to the south. There's the east and the west, and there is always a centerpiece, which is usually a cross or some sort of circle. And well, this tells us, and normally they do the prayer for the 4 directions and then to the center or Christ. And of course, they understand Christ as a sort of cosmic human. Like, it means the Son of God, which is in all of us. It is the cosmic Christ, as some would call it. And so part of the velada is to somehow make the consultant be identified with the center of the world, so he can then become aware of his connection to every other being, and so he remembers the ancestral memory that he is a microcosmic image of totality, or as more modern concepts would say it in physics, as an holographic image that reflects everything else. So by doing that, he or she can understand the origin of their disease. And normally, they believe that illness is somehow connected to a sort of imbalance, be it on the physical, emotional, social and community, or spiritual dimension. So every action, every word, every thought that we have has a sort of echo in the rest of the interwoven entities or beings. The ego's perception of being separated from everything else is dissolved, and a deeper understanding of being interwoven in the cosmic web of life is revealed. For them, we're all part of an all-encompassing unity. We're all one, and we are, and the actions of the individual affect the rest of totality. So, in this perspective, self and other are just different aspects of the same one being. In the vertical dimension, meaning like not in the table, but more up and down of the table, they represent that the journey is conceived as a flight into the different realms, different levels of the spiritual geography. There is usually an arc above the altar, which represents the pilgrimage of the sun, which also is a sort of like the passing of time in human existence. That goes to the upper world, where the gods and the saints reside, and then the sun goes down and passes through down to the underworld, where the dead and the ancestors live. It is a cyclical journey to recognize the different invisible entities that exist in the cosmic web of life. From this perspective, as I said, illness is conceived as an imbalance caused by some fault, some grievance, some offense, or some unconscious or ignorant action that harms another person, society, nature, or spiritual beings, even if I don't see them, even if I am not in their same level of existence. The image of human being for men and women of knowledge is not conceived as an isolated entity, neither from the social group nor from nature. And therefore, healing is a process of individual reparation in relationship to community and the cosmos. After the ceremony, the healer usually asks the consultant to make an offering to one of the spiritual entities as a way of reciprocal payment and recognition of the spiritual entities. Healing comes when an individual has paid its debt in a reciprocal way, so it can again come into harmony and take its place in the interwoven net of being. So, what can we learn from this deep wisdom of the Mazatec's cosmology? So I'm just getting a very short summary. I mean, I've done so much research into this, but some of the things that I would like to say is that, well, first, by acknowledging our ancestors and recognizing that we're part of a bigger whole, we get to gain the right place to keep growing, not just by myself, but with the others. Also, we're not isolated and separate entities. Everything we do affects the others. Illness is an imbalance in the relationship with otherness, and healing comes when we act in a reciprocal way and pay our debts to our community. We're all interwoven in the divine unity, and we're all one. We are a community. So, after looking at all of this, I would like just to remain with one question. How can the global North support and ally the global South, mainly with indigenous people, but also with people from Latin America, from Mexico, from Peru, and other parts of the global South, which has had a very hard time with development of new research and, well, an economical situation in general. So I don't have the answer for this question, and I'm hoping that this is something that we as a global psychedelic movement prioritize. We cannot ignore the fact that we live in a globalized world and that we need to make efforts to integrate and recognize the other as part of us, as an important aspect in the development of the psychedelic science. So we are a community. If one of us is missing, then we are not complete. We are imbalanced and wounded. We need to strive for wholeness. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give it one more round of applause for Mario, please. So Mario, thank you so much again. And I was curious, as we get into this Q&A, with your deep love of the dreams and the sacred, what can you share with us about your experience in studying and understanding that level of the world and reality and life? How can that support our understanding and inspiration in the work that we need to do in this world? What is the relationship? What's the bridge?
Sure. So of course, again, this is a very complex topic that I've studied a lot, and I will try to summarize it a little. So I think one of the big difference in cosmology from the indigenous people, at least from the Mazatecs, and I would again say from most of indigenous traditions, is that, well, Western people tend to take the inner world, the images that come from dreams and fantasies and visions as just something subjective, something that doesn't have a real effect on the outside world. But people from the indigenous traditions usually tend to give image and fantasy and the invisible world is taken as a reality. So they, the Mazatec people, they are very used to, whenever they wake up, they gather in family and share the dreams that they've had, because it is very important for them to understand what's going on inside. For them, dream is just as vision, a way of the soul traveling through the different realms of the spiritual geography. And so they also do that with their visions. And by doing that, by sharing their images, they interweave the invisible reality in a more collective way. That's how myths came to be, and that's how they have this complex web of images and symbols of saints and divinities and invisible entities, so they can recognize, like, if someone has had a particular dream and can share it with the Shotashine or the sage, they might recognize, oh, so you dreamt of this, or you, and so that means that you need to take care of this or this, and yeah, that's in another way of saying they have a collective memory or a communitary unconscious. And that is something that we as Westerners should learn to relate to this invisible world and images in a more collective and respectful way.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I'm going to jump into some of the questions coming from the audience.
Sure.
So let's see. We have a question here, Mario. What would be the appropriate and effective structure to provide reparations to the Mazatec people?
Sorry, to provide operations? Reparations.
Reparations, yes.
Okay. So it is a very complex situation, since just financing or giving money to the people, it's not the only way to do things. And so the way in the research project that I'm working at are trying to set the restoration or reparations is by getting to know their people, getting to know their specific needs. So maybe there is someone that tries to publish a book, so we want to help them. Maybe, well, and some of the gorgeous paintings that you saw in the slides, they come from a Mazatec painter that portrays the traditional images and traditional, I don't know how to say in English, but anyway, some of it depicts some of the most important spiritual beliefs in the Mazatec. So I particularly has helped him so much into, well, get your work to be known, and arrange him an exhibition in some other museum and stuff like that. It's not, I mean, it's more like getting to know their people, getting to know their specific needs, helping them develop their own pursuits, their own projects, and yeah, that's one of the ideas that I feel it's important.
You said earlier in your talk around what healing is, and you mentioned this idea of paying your debts, and I'm curious if what are some ways, some concrete ways that you can think of that would look like, for example, psychedelic organizations or industry as it's building here. What does it look like for us to really pay our debts?
So again, it's some things that I still don't have the answers, but I can think that maybe one of the steps is by first acknowledging them as the ancestors of the psychedelic movement, and secondly, I guess, like, well, there is something that one Mazatec guy told me, is that well, there is so much research on the therapeutic potential of the psilocybin mushrooms, but they do not know about it. They do not have access to it. They don't have I mean, even if they want to continue growing and maybe getting to learn also from Western psychotherapy to be applied to their own traditions, like, it's really hard for them to actually be able to do that. And I'm very, very happy that I've been hearing along these days that there are some scholarships for BIPOC people. So I would suggest maybe it would be really good to try to reach to the indigenous communities so they can also prepare and understand the Western ways. Not that that wouldn't mean that they leave aside their own traditions. I would believe that that is something complementary. We shouldn't put indigenous people as, oh, so there will always be like in their tradition, or there will always be within their own perspective. No, they're as us, people who can learn from both worlds. And that can be very beneficial for all of us.
Thank you. Some other questions coming in here. Mario, so how common was it for psilocybin to be used traditionally? And do you think that Measure 109 will result in a uniquely high level of use and access?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part?
Do you think that Measure 109 will result in a uniquely high level of access and use?
I see. Well, for the first part of the question, like how often they use
And
it?
how common was it in sort of traditional cultures for psilocybin to be used?
Well, it has been very used, like it's very ancient, and so and this is something quite interesting. They actually use mushrooms for things that we normally, in Western perspective, wouldn't thought about, such as like, oh, so my how do you say, my business is not going well, so I can consult with mushrooms and to see like if whether I have an imbalance in the community, and so that's why my situation is not going well. And even for stuff like, oh, so one of my chicken is lost, so I can consult the mushroom. So that's also something really interesting because they part from a very different cosmology, from which mushrooms can actually tell you things that you don't really know, and it's been effective in some ways. So anyway. Yes, it is very used. It's very common. It is actually, since most of the people in the Sierra Mazateca, they don't have access to medicine or to doctors, everything is healed by mushrooms. And so yeah, that tells us a bit more of the importance that they have with these practices. And for the second thing, well, I am kind of ignorant with the Measure 109, so I can't really say much, but what I can imagine is that, of course, this might bring so much more access to the people here in the States, but what I'm worrying, is that it's gonna be accessible for other people, like not in the States? Is it possible to maybe provide certain special scholarships so that people from the Mazatec town can come and get benefits from the therapies and the trainings? That's what I would suggest.
And we'll go with one last question, sort of combining a couple of questions that have come from the audience, really going on what you just shared. So what does like true reciprocity and true alignment look like in terms of organizations, be that clinics, be that educational institutions, to truly partner with the Mazatec in a way that actually doesn't replicate the harm that we're trying to undo?
Yes, so I believe one of the most important aspects of trying to get a reciprocal way of dealing with these people is by really getting to know them. So that's one of the very important aspects of this project that I work at, is that we need anthropologists or people that get in touch with them and interact with them and live with them and share a very like a friendship relationship. And because that is way better than just funding and giving them money just in a general sense. It's more like we need to really understand their very specific needs and trying to. So what I can imagine that maybe there could be some sort of foundation that can donate for a group of people that should be organized both from Mazatec people and people that are not indigenous, that in an alliance can work together to see how to use these funds, not for just individual projects, but the funds that help build a more communitary sense of benefit.
Beautiful, thank you. And with our last minute, I just really want to open it up to you, Mario, if there's anything in your heart that's coming through that feels present that you want to share.
I mean, I think I've said the message, but anyway, well, I just want to ask of you people of the North, coming from a underdeveloped country and being a voice from the South, I would like to ask of you, do not forget us. We are a community. We are all one. We're all part of the same unity. Thank you.